Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
The main character, after dying in his previous life, he wakes up as Spider-Man inside of Teen Wolf. What is Spider-Man gonna do inside of Teen Wolf?
Chapter 1. A life wasted on nothing. Elias had become good at taking up as little space as possible. He sat in the back row, finished assignments before anyone asked, and let his parents believe silence meant he was easy. At school, he could make 3 people laugh with a whispered comment and still spend lunch alone because nobody thought to save him a seat. That afternoon, a storm rolled over the town while Elias worked late in the library. The lights flickered. A teacher locked the front doors and told the remaining students to wait for the rain to pass. Elias noticed the smell first, hot plastic beneath the sharper scent of wet concrete. The alarm began after the west corridor filled with smoke. Students shouted and pushed toward the exit, but a fallen display case blocked the narrowest route. Elias saw a younger boy trapped behind it, crying too hard to lift his head. The adults were trying to reach him from the other side. Elias crawled through the smoke. He braced his shoulder against the case and felt something tear in his back. The boy's hand closed around his sleeve. "Look at me," Elias said. "We are going to move together. When I say go, you go." The case shifted. The boy slipped free and ran toward the lights. Elias tried to follow, but the ceiling groaned above him. A burning beam came down between the corridor and the exit. He pushed once, then again, until the metal stopped moving. For a moment, he could hear the rain through the roof. He thought about the empty messages on his phone, the dinner he had skipped, and the life he had kept postponing until he became someone worth noticing. The thought arrived without self-pity. It was simply true. Elias lay back as smoke covered the ceiling. He had wanted more time, not fame or revenge, only one chance to stop waiting for permission to live. The fire took the air from his lungs. His last clear thought was that the boy had made it out. Then the corridor went dark. The boy Elias had pulled from behind the display case survived. Elias never knew that. The boy's name was Noah Kim, 12 years old, and he spent the next week answering the same question from adults who wanted a clean sequence. What happened? Smoke. Display case. Older student. A beam. The order changed every time. The part that stayed was Elias' hand around his sleeve. Look at me. Noah remembered that sentence more clearly than the fire alarm. At the hospital, his mother asked who saved him. He said, Elias. She did not know which Elias. The school did. A teacher found the library sign-in sheet. One student had remained after the others left. The name reached local news for a day. Not hero coverage. A paragraph. 17-year-old student dies after helping younger student escape school fire. The kind of article people shared, wrote 3 comments under, and then moved past. Elias' parents received calls. His mother sat at the dining room table with his untouched dinner still in the refrigerator and listened to strangers explain that he had been brave. She hated every one of them for knowing something about her son she had not known that afternoon. His father found Elias' phone. 3 unread messages. 1 draft never sent. I think I might join the photography club. Nothing dramatic. A tiny future plan. That hurt worse. Noah attended the funeral with his mother. He stood far behind everyone and stared at the closed casket. The adults kept saying Elias gave his life. Noah did not like that sentence. Elias had not handed anything over. He had been trying to get out too. Noah remembered the last shove. The way Elias looked toward the exit after Noah cleared the case. He had wanted to live. Years later, Noah would still correct people when they said otherwise. He didn't want to die for me. Then, after a pause, he just didn't leave me there. That difference never reached Peter Parker. The second life began without access to the aftermath of the first. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe not. What survived was the wrong lesson at first. More time, more control, more ability to move before the room closed. It would take Beacon Hills for Peter to discover the other lesson hidden in the fire. Elias had not saved Noah because he had enough power. He had saved him because, for one moment, someone else was there with him and the choice mattered. Power came later. The choice had come first. Chapter 2. A new life begins in Beacon Hills. Peter Parker woke on a bedroom floor with his cheek against cold wood and a headache that did not belong to any dream. He did not remember falling asleep. He remembered a burning corridor, a boy's hand on his sleeve, and the certainty that he had not survived. He sat up slowly. The room was unfamiliar but lived in. A desk covered in school papers, a cracked baseball glove, a family photograph with his own face in it. The name written on a timetable beside the desk was Peter Parker. He read it twice before the letters stopped looking like a mistake. The mirror made the truth worse. The face was younger than Elias had been, thinner, and unmistakably the face from memories that did not belong to his first life. Peter touched his jaw, then his chest, counting breaths until panic gave way to observation. No webbing, no strength, no warning sense. Nothing supernatural answered him. A woman stopped outside the door. Her relief when she saw him was too large for an ordinary morning. She crossed the room, held his face between both hands, and asked where he had been. Peter almost said dead. Instead he said, "I fell asleep badly." She accepted the lie because she needed him alive more than she needed an explanation. Her name was May Parker. The knowledge arrived with the rest of the life. Beacon Hills, a school across town, parents who were not in the house, and a town whose quiet felt crowded even in daylight. At school, Peter kept his head down and watched the students. Scott McCall looked exhausted. Styles Stalinsky talked too quickly about a body found in the preserve. When the word werewolf appeared as a joke, Scott flinched hard enough for Peter to notice. Peter returned home before dark and searched the bedroom for proof that this was a hallucination. The proof remained stubbornly physical. He was Peter now, powerless and alive in a town that already seemed to be hiding something. He locked the door, opened a blank notebook, and wrote one sentence: "Survive before trying to understand." May found Peter's notebook while looking for a missing utility bill. She did not open it. The cover lay on the desk beside a timetable and 3 school forms. One line was visible because Peter had left the first page half open. Survive before trying to understand. May stood in the doorway. Peter was downstairs showering. She could read more. She didn't. Instead, she closed the notebook and placed the utility bill beside it when she found it under the lamp. At dinner, Peter noticed the notebook had moved. His shoulders went tight. May saw. "I was looking for the electric bill." Peter looked at her. "Did you read it?" "The first line." His face closed. May hated how quickly that happened. She said, "I closed it." Peter stared. "Why?" "Because it's yours." The answer seemed to confuse him. May had expected relief. Instead, he looked almost suspicious of kindness. She put down her fork. "You know you don't have to earn privacy by having a good explanation." Peter looked at his plate. "I know." He didn't sound like he did. May changed subject. School. Food. Whether he needed a rain jacket. Peter answered. No interrogation. The next morning, May found a note on the counter. "Thanks." No context. She smiled. The trust went both ways sooner than either understood. Peter had already begun lying about impossible things. May had already begun choosing not to invade every gap just because fear made it tempting. That pattern would matter later when bruises appeared. When Spider-Man appeared on television. When Peter finally lifted the kitchen table and made every old excuse collapse at once. For now, it was only a closed notebook. A small, ordinary boundary in a house where nothing felt ordinary to Peter yet. At school that day, Peter saw May's handwriting on the lunch bag. Eat the apple this time. He almost laughed. The fruit stayed in the bag until last period. Red. He took it out. The intersection flickered through memory. Not enough to stop him. Peter ate half. It tasted normal. That felt like evidence too. Chapter 3. The New Kid in Town. Peter learned very quickly that Beacon Hills High was the kind of place where a secret could become a rumor before lunch. Scott and Styles had apparently decided that the dead body in the preserve was not enough reason to stay out of the preserve. Peter found this out because Styles leaned across the lunch table and whispered, hypothetically, if someone wanted to go back to a crime scene before the sheriff's department finished searching it. No. Styles blinked. I didn't ask the question. You were going to. Scott sat beside him looking pale. His sleeve was pulled lower than necessary. Peter noticed the blood before he noticed Scott, noticing him notice. The two boys stared at each other. Styles followed both of their eyes. What? Nothing, Scott said too fast. Peter took a bite of his sandwich. Definitely nothing. Styles looked from one to the other. Okay, great. Both of you are doing the secretive eye thing now. Peter had known Scott for less than a week and already understood three things. Scott was terrible at lying. Styles was too good at noticing bad lies. Beacon Hills had enough weirdness that Peter's own impossible second life no longer felt like the most urgent problem in the room. That afternoon, Styles convinced both of them to go back. Peter told himself he was going because someone had found half a body in the preserve, and Scott had been bitten by something no normal animal should have been able to hide from deputies. That was true. It was not the whole truth. The real reason was that the howl from the night before had stayed with him. Not in memory. In his bones. The preserve was wet from rain and colder beneath the trees. Styles carried a flashlight despite the daylight. Scott kept touching the bite beneath his sleeve. Peter walked a few steps behind. What bit you? He asked quietly. Scott flinched. Styles stopped dead. What bit you? Scott glared at Peter. Thanks. You were bleeding through your sleeve. Styles grabbed Scott's wrist. Scott pulled away. Don't. Styles went pale when he saw the teeth marks. That is not a dog bite. I know. Mountain lion. Peter looked at the spacing. No. Both turned toward him. He regretted speaking. Styles narrowed his eyes. Why do you know that? Peter shrugged. Library. You've been here 4 days. I read fast. The excuse worked badly. A branch snapped deeper in the woods. All three went still. Peter felt no superhuman warning. Not yet. Only ordinary adrenaline. Scott's head turned sharply toward the sound. Too sharply. Did you hear that? Peter asked. Scott looked at him. Styles whispered, hear what? Another snap. Closer. Peter saw movement between trees. A tall figure. Leather jacket. Dark hair. Watching. Derek Hale. Peter did not know the name yet, but he knew the look. The man was not lost. He was not curious. He was assessing. Scott stepped backward. The figure disappeared. Styles whispered, okay, nope. They left faster than they had entered. Back at school, Scott was sweating badly enough that Coach asked if he was sick. Peter watched him crush the metal edge of his desk with one hand and then stare at his fingers as if someone else had done it. That was when Peter stopped thinking the bite was only a bite. After class, Scott cornered him near the stairwell. "You saw him. The guy in the woods." "Yes." "You know him." "No." Scott lowered his voice. "I can hear things." Peter did not joke. "What kind of things?" "Everything." A heartbeat passed. Scott looked embarrassed by how frightened he sounded. Peter knew that feeling. "Then don't test it in a crowd." Scott stared. "What?" "If everything is loud, go somewhere quiet before you find out what your limits are." "How do you know?" Peter almost laughed. Because he had died once and woken in another person's life, with a wandless body that might or might not become Spider-Man. Because being careful with impossible things seemed like a decent first principle. Instead, he said, because finding out in the cafeteria sounds terrible. Scott breathed out. "Yeah." Styles appeared at the end of the hall. "There you both are." He looked suspicious. Peter smiled. "Nothing happening." That sentence has become meaningless. At home, Peter opened his notebook. He wrote, "Scott bite, enhanced hearing, strength." Then, man in preserve, watching Scott. Then, beneath both. "Do not assume my story is the only impossible one here." He stared at the last sentence for a while. Elias had died believing life had kept happening around him while he waited to matter. Peter Parker was not going to make the same mistake by treating everyone else's life like scenery for his. The man in the preserve left a second clue Peter did not find until 2 days later. Derek's boot print beside an animal track. The animal track was too large for a normal wolf. Peter crouched in the mud while Styles photographed from 3 angles. Scott stood farther away. "I hate this." Styles looked up. "The print. Being back here." Peter understood. The bite had happened nearby. Every tree probably felt like a witness. "Then leave." Scott looked at him. "What?" "We can photograph without you." Styles nodded immediately. Scott stared as if he had expected an argument. "But this is about me. Doesn't mean you have to stand on the exact dirt where it happened." Scott looked toward the road, then left. Peter and Styles continued. No judgment. Later, Peter realized Scott had taught him something without intending. A person did not owe proximity to their own evidence. When Elia's memories surfaced, Peter often treated them like rooms he had to re-enter because understanding demanded it. Maybe not. The boot print gave them a route. Derek had circled Scott that night. Watching, not attacking. Styles said, protecting. Maybe. Stalking. Also maybe. Threatening. Potentially. Styles smiled. "You're no fun." Peter photographed the trail. Then stopped. One more track led deeper. The old urge said follow. Do not chase something that wants to be chased. Peter remembered his own rule. We have enough. Styles looked disappointed. You hate stopping. Yes. Why? Peter considered. Because stopping without an answer felt like surrender. Because Elias had spent his life waiting, and Peter now confused movement with living. He did not say that. Because Beacon Hills rewards bad curiosity. Styles nodded solemnly. That is true. They left. The trail stayed. The forest did not punish them for not finishing it that day. 2 nights later, Derek appeared on his own terms. The information arrived anyway. That became another pattern Peter learned slowly. Not every unanswered question expired if he walked away. Chapter 4, Static Under the Skin. The first sign that Peter's body was changing was not strength. It was timing. In biology, Mr. Harris knocked a glass slide off the edge of the lab table. Peter caught it before he heard it hit anything. His hand moved. The slide stopped between 2 fingers. The room went quiet. Peter stared at his own hand. Mr. Harris stared too. Good reflexes. Peter set the slide down. Lucky. Styles, 2 tables away, did not look convinced. Scott looked worse. Peter spent the rest of class feeling static beneath his skin. Not electricity. Pressure. Like every nerve had become a fraction too awake. When a chair scraped behind him, he knew before turning. When someone reached for a dropped pencil, his eyes moved before the hand. When Mr. Harris threw an eraser toward a sleeping student, Peter flinched before the eraser left his fingers. That frightened him. After school, he went somewhere empty. An old service road near the preserve. No witnesses. No Styles. No Scott. Peter stood beneath a tree and tossed a tennis ball against the trunk. Caught it. Again. Faster. Again. He closed his eyes. The ball struck back. His hand moved. Caught. Peter opened his eyes. No. He tried again. Different angle. Caught. Then deliberately distracted himself by reciting multiplication tables. Caught. The awareness was not hearing. Not sight. It was more like the world becoming tense before something touched him. Not spider sense yet. A beginning. He pressed both hands to his face. His heartbeat was too fast. The next test was strength. He found a fallen branch thick enough that he would have needed 2 people to lift normally. Peter crouched. Pulled. The branch rose. Not effortlessly, but far too easily. He dropped it. The impact made birds scatter. Peter stood in the silence. His first thought should have been excitement. Instead, he thought about doors. About how much force a body could use before ordinary things broke. He went home and tested carefully. A kitchen chair. Lifted one-handed. A heavy toolbox. Easy. A pull-up bar mounted in his bedroom doorway. He grabbed it. Pulled. The entire bracket ripped out of the wood and hit him in the shoulder. May shouted from downstairs. Peter. I'm fine. He stared at the screws hanging from splintered wood. May came up anyway. She looked at the damaged doorframe. Then at Peter. What happened? Peter held the metal bar. It was loose. May looked at the screws. Very loose. He forced a smile. I'll fix it. She did not believe him. She also did not push. That made the lie hurt more. That night, Peter climbed onto the roof. Not with webs. Just hands. He pressed one palm against the siding. His skin held. He moved 1 foot higher. The shoe slipped. His bare hand did not. Peter stared. Then he removed both shoes. Climbed. Slowly. The side of the house should not have supported him. It did. He reached the roofline. Pulled himself over. Sat under the moon. His hands were shaking. A text arrived. Styles. Scott is acting insane. Call me. Then another. Seriously, he caught a lacrosse ball without looking, and coach is acting like he discovered religion. Peter looked toward the dark town. Scott changing. Peter changing. Two different impossible things within days of each other. He called. Styles answered immediately. Okay, I need you to tell me I'm not crazy. I don't know you well enough. Peter. What happened? Styles explained. Scott's hearing. Strength. Lacrosse. Aggression. The bite. Peter listened. Then Styles said the word. Werewolf. Peter was silent. Say something. That's stupid. Thank you. That doesn't mean wrong. Styles went quiet. Peter looked at his own hand, gripping the roof edge. Meet tomorrow. Library. Somewhere without people. Styles paused. Why? Peter looked down 3 stories. Because he had just climbed the house with bare hands. Because the world was changing underneath both of them. Because secrets became more dangerous when everyone guessed alone. Because Beacon Hills has enough public disasters already. Styles accepted. After the call, Peter flexed his wrist. A strange pressure built beneath the skin. He pressed his palm against the roof. Nothing. Again. The pressure sharpened. A tiny white strand shot from his wrist and stuck to the gutter. Peter stopped breathing. He touched the strand. Strong. Sticky. Organic. Spider-Man. Not a costume. Not a memory. Not a story he had somehow fallen into. His body was becoming it. Peter sat on the roof until the strand dissolved in the rain. Then he went downstairs and wrote for almost an hour. Strength. Adhesion. Reflex. Danger awareness. Webbing. Unknown limits. At the bottom of the page, he added one rule in large letters. Test slowly. Elias had died in a fire because a situation became too fast for every safe choice. Peter had a second life. He refused to make power another emergency. He only understood after it hurt someone. Peter's first wall-crawling failure left a handprint on the siding May noticed the next morning. Not a normal handprint. 4 fingers pressed into rain-softened paint above the second floor. May stood below. Peter came outside. Saw where she was looking. His stomach dropped. What is that? He looked up. Maybe a raccoon. May turned slowly. A raccoon with 5 human fingers. Peter closed his eyes. Large raccoon. May laughed despite herself. Then became serious. Peter. He had no explanation. Not one that would survive. This was before the full reveal, before Spider-Man, before May knew anything. Peter looked at the house. The damaged siding was his mistake. He had tested too close to home because secrecy felt easiest where he controlled the environment. Wrong. Home contained other people. Evidence mattered here too. I climbed. May stared. Peter immediately realized that was almost worse. You climbed the side of the house. Not normally. Silence. He had stepped too far. May's face changed. Peter corrected carefully. I've been doing parkour stuff. It was a lie. Weak. May looked at the mark again. Peter, if you fall off the roof. I won't. That confidence was the real mistake. May looked at him sharply. Peter stopped. I mean, I'll be careful. She accepted enough to continue the morning. Peter spent the day thinking about the handprint. At night, He repaired the siding manually with paint from the garage, rather than trying to hide it using an ability he did not understand. He made a new testing rule. Not simply asterisk test slowly. Do not test at home if failure becomes May's problem. The preserve became training ground partly because of that. So did abandoned rooftops. The secret identity was shaped before the mask by where Peter chose to make mistakes. A home could be safe without being a laboratory. He only understood that after leaving fingerprints above the second floor. Asterisk Chapter 5, The Spiderwake Asterisk. Scott nearly died because Peter hesitated to believe his own hands. The abandoned maintenance shed behind the preserve had been Stiles's idea. That should have disqualified it immediately. We need somewhere Scott can test hearing without hearing the entire school, Stiles said. Scott glared. And you picked a condemned building. It's quiet. It's condemned. Same thing structurally. Peter stood near the open door. That's not how that works. The shed smelled like wet wood and rusted tools. One wall leaned slightly outward. Peter noticed because his new danger sense had been buzzing since they arrived. Not screaming. Just wrong. Scott tried hearing exercises. Stiles whispered numbers from across the room. Scott repeated them. Peter stayed near the wall. His body kept telling him to move. He ignored it for 30 seconds. The ceiling beam snapped. Everything happened at once. Stiles shouted. Scott turned. A heavy crossbeam fell toward him. Peter moved. He did not decide to use power. He simply did. One hand hit Scott's chest and shoved him clear. The other caught the falling beam. The impact drove Peter to one knee. Wood cracked against his palm. Stiles froze. Scott froze. Peter froze last. He was holding several £100 above his head. Peter, Stiles whispered. Door. Neither moved. Door. They ran outside. Peter threw the beam sideways. It hit the wall hard enough to punch through rotted boards. Silence. Stiles turned very slowly. What? Peter looked at his hands. Scott looked at him with the exact same fear Peter had seen in his own reflection. Then the shed groaned again. More collapse. Peter's wrists burned. Instinct answered. He raised both hands. A white line shot from each. Webbing struck the sagging ceiling. Peter pulled. The web held. The falling section stopped long enough for all three to clear the building. They reached the road. Behind them, half the shed collapsed. Stiles looked at Peter, then at the white web stuck to his sleeve, then back at Peter. No. Peter's heart hammered. Scott stepped closer. You too. That was the question. Peter could lie. The evidence was hanging from the building. He looked at Stiles. Not here. Stiles laughed once, too high. Not here, you just caught a roof. Beam. That does not improve this. They moved deeper toward the road where the trees opened. Peter told the smallest truth. I woke up different. Scott's face tightened. When? After I moved here. What are you? I don't know. Stiles pointed at the web. That looks aggressively specific. Peter almost smiled. Then a growl moved through the trees. Scott turned. His eyes flashed gold. Peter's danger sense exploded. Scott staggered backward. Stiles whispered, Oh, that's bad. The wolf inside Scott surged. His hands changed. Claws. Teeth. Peter's body crouched automatically. Scott looked at him. Run. Peter did not. Scott. Run. Peter could feel the warning pointing directly at his friend. Not monster. Friend. That distinction mattered. He backed without turning. You're still Scott. Scott growled. Do not motivational speech me right now. Styles somehow said, he's right. Both looked at him. Styles raised his hands. Bad timing. Scott's control snapped. He lunged. Peter moved sideways. Too fast for a human. Not faster than Scott. The claws missed his chest by inches. Peter fired a web. It hit Scott's shoulder and anchored to a tree. Scott tore through immediately. Peter learned. Not enough. Second line around both wrists. Scott ribbed. Third low around ankles. He fell. Peter used the moment to put distance between them. No punches. No attempt to overpower. Scott roared. Then another howl answered from deeper in the preserve. Scott went still. His face changed. Recognition. Fear. The older wolf. Derek. Scott tore the remaining web and ran into the trees. Styles started after. Peter caught his jacket. No. Scott. He's faster than us. Styles looked at Peter's wrists. Apparently not all of us. Peter shook his head. My webbing is almost gone. He could feel it physically. A drained pressure behind the wrists. His hands trembled. Power had a cost. Good to know. Terrible time to learn. They called Scott. No answer. Peter and Styles waited near the road. 20 minutes later, Scott stumbled back. Human. Exhausted. Derek was nowhere visible. Scott looked at Peter. Peter looked at Scott. Neither had the energy to pretend anymore. Styles sat on the hood of his Jeep. Okay. He pointed at Scott. Werewolf. Then Peter. Spider person. Peter closed his eyes. Please don't. What do you want me to call it? Nothing. Styles looked offended. Scott started laughing. The sound broke the fear enough that Peter joined. Only for a few seconds. Then Scott became serious. We keep this between us. Peter nodded. Styles said, obviously. Peter looked at him. Styles added, I'm going to research it obsessively. That is not keeping it. Private research. Peter rubbed his face. He had not wanted anyone to know. Now 2 people did. The strange part was that the secret felt lighter, not heavier. That scared him too. At home, Peter climbed to his bedroom window instead of using the front door because May was in the kitchen. He landed badly. His knees almost gave out. The web glands felt empty. He wrote, Webbing has reserves. Scott can tear single lines. Do not test a friend like an enemy. Then, Styles knows, Scott knows. Peter stared at the words. This was the first secret in his second life that belonged to more than one person by agreement instead of accident. He did not know whether that made it safer. For one night, it made him less alone. Styles's first Private Spider-Man file did not begin with the powers. It began with food. Peter found out because Styles asked, How many calories are you eating? Scott looked at him. Peter looked at him. What? Styles held up the notebook. After the shed, you ate 3 burgers, fries, 2 granola bars, and half my chips. You counted. Science. Peter stared. Styles continued. Webbing is biological. Strength is biological. Healing is biological. Energy has to come from somewhere. Scott nodded. Actually, that makes sense. Peter looked betrayed. They tested the least dangerous variable first. Food. Peter ate normal breakfast and tried, producing webbing in measured short strands. Styles timed. Then after a larger meal. Then after exercise. No starving tests. Peter refused. Styles complained he had not suggested starving. Peter said he was preempting. The results were rough but useful. Web output fell after repeated use. Recovery accelerated after food and sleep. Sugar alone helped less than full meals. Protein mattered, maybe. Hydration, definitely. Styles created a chart. Peter hated the chart. Scott loved the chart, because for once someone else's body was the science problem. Then May accidentally contributed. She packed a lunch with far more food after noticing Peter's appetite. Peter's recovery that afternoon improved. He wrote that down without telling her why. The secrecy felt unfair. Yet telling her immediately would have been impossible. That tension remained. Styles eventually closed the notebook. Congratulations, your superpower weakness is forgetting lunch. Peter looked. That is humiliating. Scott grinned. Better than silver. True. The practical result mattered in fights. Peter began carrying food. Not glamorous. Granola bars in the suit pouch. Electrolyte packets. A protein bar Styles claimed tasted like drywall. Peter agreed. Months later, after the service tunnel, May would drive him home while he ate because web reserves had crashed. The habit began here, with 3 teenagers at a kitchen table treating Spider-Man's metabolism like homework. The powers became less mythic, more bodily. That helped Peter. A body with limits could be cared for. A destiny could not. Chapter 6, the morning after. Peter spent Saturday morning breaking his bedroom. By noon he had damaged the pull-up bar, cracked the edge of the desk, webbed one sock to the ceiling, and learned that wall crawling worked better without shoes. May knocked after the desk cracked. Peter was upside down. He dropped to the floor so quickly he hit his head. Peter. 1 second. He tore the web line from the ceiling, shoved the sock under the bed, and opened the door. May looked at him. Then the desk. Then the missing pull-up bar. Are you training for something? Peter's brain stopped. Gym. Gym. Class. You're destroying furniture for PE. He smiled weakly. May's expression said she was filing the conversation for later. When she left, Peter locked the door and immediately felt guilty. He unlocked it again. No reason to make the room more suspicious. The afternoon tests were more controlled. He climbed onto the roof. Marked distances with chalk. Web line from wrist to gutter. 5 feet. 10. 20. At 30, the strand weakened. At 40, it detached. Different firing pressure changed thickness. A short burst produced adhesive. A long pull produced a rope-like strand. He could make wider sheets only by crossing multiple lines. The webs dissolved after a while. That mattered. Evidence would not remain forever. Peter felt relieved. Then he realized timed dissolution meant rescue anchors might fail. Less relieved. He tested load. Backpack. Toolbox. Himself. He anchored a line to the chimney and leaned backward over the roof. The web held. He swung. Badly. Peter slammed into the side of the house. He hung there for a second, forehead against siding. No one saw that. A window opened below. Neighbor. Peter pulled himself up before she looked. He stopped swinging tests until he had space. The preserve gave him that after dark. Styles came because of course he did. Scott came because he had his own control exercises. Peter wore a hoodie and cheap ski mask. Styles looked at him. That is terrible. It hides my face. It makes you look like you're robbing a hardware store. Do you have a better one? Styles opened the back of the Jeep. He did. Of course. A black fabric mask. Modified goggles. Where did you get those? Motorcycle shop. Peter stared. You planned this. Peter, you crawled on a wall yesterday. Scott took the goggles. These are actually good. Styles looked proud. Peter took them reluctantly. They practiced. Scott ran. Peter tried to follow through trees using web swings. The first attempt ended in mud. Second, branch. Third, he found the rhythm. Web ahead. Jump. Swing through. Release before the line pulled backward. Land or fire another. The danger sense helped with branches. Not with pride. He hit one anyway. Scott stopped laughing only when Peter threw mud at him. Then Scott shifted partially. Not full wolf. Eyes. Claws. He practiced approaching without attacking. Peter practiced not treating every warning as permission to strike. The spider sense was strange. Scott caused it because he was dangerous. Styles throwing a stick caused it. A falling branch. A hidden hole. The sense did not tell Peter what to do. It told him something could hurt. That distinction saved Scott from getting webbed to a tree every time his claws appeared. By midnight, Peter had learned 3 important things. His reflexes were absurd. His webbing regenerated faster after food and rest. His body could heal small cuts faster than normal, but not instantly. Scott looked at him. You think we should tell someone? Peter knew who he meant. Derek. Maybe Deaton. An adult. Peter looked toward town. Eventually. Styles groaned. You two are the worst secret keepers, because you keep deciding secrecy is morally complicated. Peter smiled. You can leave. Absolutely not. At home, May had left a plate covered on the counter. Peter stood in the dark kitchen, mask hidden in his backpack, and ate cold pasta. Power made him hungry. Heroism made him late. Secrets made May leave food without asking where he had been. Peter hated that part. He wrote another rule. If secrecy starts making May responsible for a life she doesn't understand, tell her enough to choose. He underlined nothing. Too early. But the sentence stayed. The first time Peter tried to sleep on the ceiling, he lasted 11 minutes. Styles had suggested it as a joke. If you can stick to walls, maybe you can sleep upside down like a bat. Spiders don't sleep like bats. Somebody online will think you do. Peter should have ignored him. Instead, at 1 in the morning, curiosity won. He climbed to the ceiling in sweatpants, pressed his back flat, and tried to relax. The adhesion worked. The rest did not. His shoulders stayed tense. Blood pressure felt wrong. Every tiny house sound became more noticeable because his body knew falling while asleep was possible. At minute 11, the spider sense gave a small warning. Peter opened his eyes. The ceiling paint beneath one hand was peeling, not his adhesion failing. The house. He released immediately and landed on the mattress. A strip of paint came with him. Peter stared. Another rule. His power could hold. The structure he used might not. That lesson became important far beyond ceiling experiments. Web anchors, roofs, railings, rescue points. Strong web attached to weak brick was still a weak system. The next day, Peter walked around town differently. He looked at what things were attached to. Fire escapes, signs, balconies, streetlights. At school, he noticed a corroded handrail on the second-floor stairs. No supernatural danger. He told maintenance. A week later, it was replaced. Styles found out and laughed. Spider-Man saves railing. Shut up. Then one night, during practice, Peter anchored to an old brick chimney. The web held. The chimney did not. It tore loose. Peter released before the entire stack collapsed. Bricks fell into an empty alley. No one hurt. He spent 40 minutes moving debris away from the road and anonymously called the property owner about a structural hazard. The next day, he told Styles. Styles added a line to the suit notebook. Anchor rating. Peter stared. We are not rating every building. Why not? Because I'm not a civil engineer. Exactly, so use categories. Green, steel beam. Yellow, brick. Red, decorative nonsense. Peter hated how useful it was. They created a simple habit. Before full-load web anchor, Peter checked visually if time allowed. Rust. Cracks. Attachment points. No amount of super strength made rotten infrastructure trustworthy. That changed his rescues. At the laundromat parking lot, he had pulled on a light pole without thinking. Lucky. At the Hale ruins, broken beams. Risk. Future fights became less about what Peter could hold and more about whether the world around him could survive him holding it. May liked this lesson more than most. Finally, something that sounds like not destroying property. Peter looked. I don't destroy that much. She showed him a list. Doorframe. Desk. Roof paint. 1 gutter. 2 alley bricks. Peter stared. You've been tracking. Home repairs cost money. Fair. Peter began helping fix ordinary damage. Not secretly with webs. Actual tools. May taught him how to patch drywall. Styles knew basic wiring from questionable reasons. Scott was terrible with everything mechanical. The first Saturday, they repaired the garage shelf Peter had cracked. No masks. No supernatural crisis. Peter held the shelf while May drilled. He did not use full strength. She said, "You can let go." Peter did. The shelf stayed up. That simple success felt different from holding a collapsing beam. No emergency. No adrenaline. A structure built correctly did not need a hero pressed against it forever. Peter thought about that more than he expected. Chapter 7, A New Beginning. Peter's first masked rescue did not involve a werewolf. That was what made it real. The laundromat parking lot was almost empty after midnight. Peter had been practicing swings along the warehouse district when his spider sense tightened so sharply that he changed direction in midair. He landed on a brick wall. 2 men had dragged a delivery driver from a van. A child was inside the locked back compartment. Peter could hear the banging. No supernatural threat. No pack. No hunters. Just people. His first thought was to call police. He did. Then he looked at the men kicking the driver. Police would take minutes. Peter had seconds. He pulled the cheap mask over his face. Stiles's goggles fogged immediately. Great. He jumped. The first man looked up. Peter fired a web. Too much. The man's arm snapped backward and stuck to the van hard enough to make him scream. Peter froze. He had used too much force. The second man swung a tire iron. Spider sense flared. Peter ducked. The iron passed overhead. He caught the man's wrist. Careful. Too careful. The man head butted him. Peter staggered. Okay. He webbed the tire iron instead of the man. Yanked it away. The first thief tore his sleeve free, but remained webbed at the wrist. Peter moved between both. The driver was trying to crawl. The child kept pounding inside the van. Peter's priorities clarified. He webbed one man's shoes to the pavement. The other got a wide sheet across chest and arms. Then Peter turned his back on them and went to the van. The rear lock had jammed. Peter could rip the door off. Witnesses. Cameras. He looked around. One laundromat security camera. One traffic camera. Mask covered. Fine. He pulled. The latch broke. The door opened. A boy of maybe 8 threw himself out. Peter caught. It's okay. The child's eyes went huge behind Peter's goggles. Are you a ninja? Peter almost laughed. Terrible one. Police sirens approached. The driver was conscious. The thieves were stuck. Peter looked at the camera. Evidence. He needed to leave. The child grabbed his sleeve. Wait. Peter stopped. The old life hit him unexpectedly. A younger boy in smoke. A hand on Elias' sleeve. Peter crouched. You're safe. What's your name? He had no answer. Not Peter. Not Elias. No name that would not create something bigger. Go to your dad. The boy did. Peter climbed the wall and disappeared before police arrived. At school the next morning, everyone had seen the video. Blurry. Dark hoodie. White eye lenses. Webbing. Stiles slammed his phone onto the lunch table. Spider-Man. Peter nearly choked. Scott looked at him. Peter looked at Stiles. Who called him that? Internet. Already. Someone posted the laundromat footage at 2 a.m. Peter wanted to die a second time. Stiles scrolled. Spider-Guy, Webman, Spider-Man is winning. Scott was trying not to smile. Peter kicked him under the table. Stiles did not notice, or pretended not to. The real problem was the video. Shoes. Gait. Height. Stiles paused. Zoomed. Peter's stomach dropped. What? The shoes. Peter kept his face blank. Stiles looked down at Peter's shoes. Then back at the phone. Peter had worn the same pair. Stiles slowly raised his eyes. Peter said, lots of people own sneakers. Those have a blue tear on the left heel. Peter looked down. There it was. He had never noticed. Scott covered a laugh with a cough. Peter took the phone. Video quality is terrible. That's not a denial. Because this is stupid. Technically true. That afternoon, Peter bought different shoes. Styles added a line to his evidence board anyway. Not accusing Peter. Not yet. Peter realized the mask did not automatically create a secret identity. Everything around the mask mattered. Shoes, height, voice, timing, injuries, absences. He needed to be smarter. He also discovered something else. The child from the van was alive. The driver was alive. The thieves would recover. No one had died because Peter was too late. The rescue had worked. That mattered more than the rumor. At home, May looked at the Spider-Man clip on television. Peter froze in the doorway. She shook her head. That boy is going to get himself killed. Peter's throat tightened. Maybe. He should call the police. He did. May looked at him. Then leave the rest to people trained for it. Peter had no answer. He carried the plate she had saved him upstairs. The mask sat, hidden beneath a chemistry textbook. In the notebook, he wrote, "Never let a rescue become proof of Peter Parker." Then underneath, "But don't let hiding Peter Parker become more important than the rescue." That second line mattered more. Chapter 8, The Spider Awakens. Styles built the board because secrets offended him personally. Peter found out after school when Styles grabbed his backpack and said, "You're coming over." That's not how invitations work. It is when I have evidence. Scott, standing beside them, looked suddenly fascinated by his shoelaces. Peter stared at him. "You told him." "I told him nothing." Styles pointed at both of them. "You two are terrible." The board in Styles's room covered half a wall. Animal attacks. Missing people. The body in the preserve. Scott's bite. A printed screenshot of the laundromat video. 3 different blurry Spider-Man sightings, one of which was clearly a teenager in a ski mask jumping off a dumpster. Peter almost laughed. Then he saw the photograph in the middle. The shoes. Blue tear on left heel. Styles had circled it. Exhibit A. Peter dropped his backpack. Lots of people own shoes. Exhibit B. Another picture. A low-resolution frame from the laundromat showing Spider-Man landing. Styles had drawn a line against a door frame to estimate height. Peter closed his eyes. "You're measuring him. 5'10" to 6 foot. Scott looked at Peter. Peter looked at Scott. Styles saw that too. Exactly. Peter sat on the edge of the bed. "What do you want?" "The truth." "Which one?" Styles paused. Peter pointed at the board. "The werewolf truth, the dead body truth, the creepy man in the woods truth, the masked idiot truth." "Yes." Peter almost respected the answer. Scott sat beside him. "Styles knows about me." "I know." "And he knows you know." "I know." Styles leaned closer. "I also know Spider-Man keeps appearing within 30 minutes of Peter disappearing." Peter's stomach tightened. Then Styles held up one finger. "I know that Peter was at lunch when Spider-Man supposedly stopped a robbery across town yesterday." Peter blinked. He had not stopped that robbery. The video had been mislabeled from a different night. Styles's own evidence contradicted him. "Good." Peter stood. "Then maybe stop building conclusions before your evidence agrees." Styles looked annoyed because the criticism was fair. Scott said, "He's got you there. Nobody asked you." Peter stepped toward the board. He did not remove the photograph. That would be worse. Instead, he pointed. What is this? Spider-Man. No, what do you know? Styles sighed. A masked person with webbing. Biological. Maybe. Same height as me. Approximately. Same shoes. Maybe. Same schedule. Sometimes. Peter turned. So you have a theory. Styles crossed his arms. Very strong theory. Not proof. The distinction bought Peter time. Not safety. Time. He needed it. Then Styles showed the thing Peter had not expected. A tiny strand of web in a plastic evidence bag. Peter's blood went cold. Where? On my Jeep after the preserve. Scott's head snapped up. Peter remembered the maintenance shed. He had leaned against the Jeep. A thread must have caught. Styles held the bag carefully. Looks like protein fiber. Peter said nothing. Which is weird, Styles continued, because if Spider-Man uses manufactured web, why does it dissolve? If biological, what is producing it? And why does Peter Parker suddenly have forearms like he's been climbing walls? Peter looked at Scott. Scott was fighting a smile. Traitor. Peter could deny. He could lie harder. Instead, he changed the boundary. Styles. The humor left the room. You cannot put that on your dad's desk. Styles stared. Peter continued. You cannot show Argent. You cannot put it online. You cannot use it to prove anything. Why? Because if Spider-Man is a person, proving who he is puts everyone around him at risk. Styles's face shifted. Not confirmation. Close enough. Scott leaned forward. He's right. Styles looked at the evidence bag. Then at Peter. Are you telling me to stop? I'm telling you to think about what happens after you're right. That landed. Styles lowered the bag. For a moment, Peter thought he had won something. Then Styles said, Fine, private board. Peter groaned. That is not private. Scott laughed. The conversation changed when the board's werewolf section caught Peter's eye. Several attacks formed a rough arc around the preserve. Scott looked. Derek. Styles nodded. Maybe. Peter stared at one missing person location. Then another. These aren't random. Styles turned. What? The attacks are moving. He drew an imaginary line with one finger. Not toward town. Around it. Territorial. Hunting route. Someone searching. The board became useful. They spent an hour looking at wolf activity instead of Peter. That was the strange thing about Beacon Hills. Every secret opened onto a bigger one. Before Peter left, Styles took down the shoe photograph. Peter noticed. Why? Styles shrugged. Because if someone comes in here, that's the easiest clue. Not trust. Operational sense. Peter nodded. At the door, Styles said, For the record, I still think it's you. Peter looked back. For the record, your board includes a picture of a guy in a Spider-Man hoodie falling off a dumpster. He might be a decoy. Peter stared. Scott laughed hard enough to choke. The next morning, the board had a new section. Not identity. Rules. Spider-Man avoids killing. Prioritizes civilians. Uses biological-looking web. May be young. Peter hated the last one. He also realized Styles had stopped trying to prove Peter specifically. For now. That was enough. Styles's board eventually developed a privacy problem. Peter noticed when Lydia walked into the room without knocking. She stopped. The wall contained enough supernatural information to ruin several lives. Scott's bite timeline, Hunter locations, Spider-Man behavior, Derek's movements. No Peter face, but close. Styles lunged toward the wall like his body could cover it. Lydia stared, then looked at him. Is that why you never invite anyone over? Styles opened his mouth. Nothing came. Peter was sitting on the floor with a pizza slice. He considered jumping out the window. Too late. Lydia stepped closer. What is this? Styles said, Art. She looked at the corpse map. Serial killer Art. Peter stood. Lydia. Her eyes moved to him. Peter could feel spider sense prickling. Not danger from Lydia, danger from exposure. That distinction mattered. He did not treat her like an intruder who needed to be controlled. He asked, Do you want to know what you're looking at? Lydia looked at the board again. Do I already need to? That was a better question. Some of the information directly involved her. Death patterns. Her own strange reactions had begun. Not all of it. Peter looked at Styles. The board belonged to Styles's room, and mostly Styles's work. Styles swallowed. Some of it. They covered sections, physically with sheets. Not illusion. Not frantic removal. Then explained the part Lydia was already entangled in. Animal attacks. Werewolves in broad terms. Scott, with Scott's permission, they texted. He said yes. Spider-Man remained anonymous. Peter did not disclose his own identity. Lydia listened far more calmly than expected. Then she pointed at one line. You have 3 deaths marked as full moon. Styles nodded. Why is this one here? Another date. Wrong moon. Everyone looked. Lydia had spotted a pattern error in 30 seconds. Styles was offended. Peter smiled. Invite people over more. Never. Lydia pulled a marker from the desk and added a circle around the outlier. Whoever did this wasn't following the same pattern. That clue later helped separate alpha attacks from ritual deaths. The board improved because someone outside the original group saw assumptions they had stopped noticing. The privacy issue remained. Styles could not leave the wall exposed. They created layers. Visible board, publicish facts and coded locations. Sensitive photos and identity clues moved into a locked drawer. Not digital cloud. Not one massive map anyone could photograph. Styles complained this ruined aesthetics. Peter said, good. Then Styles asked, who gets the key? Not just you. Styles looked offended. Peter continued. If you're possessed, kidnapped, or Styles, someone else needs access. Lydia said, that last category is broad. They kept the key within the existing circle. Styles held the main copy, Scott kept the spare, and Peter knew where both were. No one person. The system was still messy. Better. Lydia left after an hour, with more questions than answers. At the door, she looked at Peter. You lie with your face. Peter's stomach dropped. What? When Spider-Man comes up. Styles froze. Peter made himself shrug. Everybody acts weird about Spider-Man. Not like you. Lydia smiled faintly. Then left. Peter stared at the closed door. Styles whispered, she knows. She suspects. Same in Lydia terms. Peter sat. He had not revealed. He had also not manipulated her memory, stolen her phone, or demanded silence. If she figured it out, another choice would come. The secret identity was becoming less about preventing every intelligent person from thinking. That was impossible. More about what people did after they thought. Peter hated how little control that gave him. He was beginning to see why it was necessary. Chapter 9. Webbed in Beacon Hills. Derek Hale found Spider-Man before Peter decided whether to find him. The preserve was moonless and wet. Peter had gone out in the mask to test higher web swings where no one could see. He felt the warning first. Sharp behind the skull. Not falling branch. Not loose footing. Predator. Peter released the web line and landed crouched on a cedar trunk. Derek stood below. "You smell wrong." Peter's voice came out through a cheap cloth muffler Styles had rigged. "That's usually rude." Derek did not smile. "You've been near Scott." "Lots of people have." "You were at the shed." Peter's spider sense tightened. Derek knew. Maybe scent. Maybe web residue. Maybe Scott had told him more than Peter realized. Peter stayed on the tree. "What do you want?" "To know whether hunters made you." That was not the question Peter expected. "Hunters." Derek's eyes flashed blue. Peter's muscles tightened. Derek saw. "So you know enough to be afraid." "I know glowing eyes are usually not a school club." Derek moved. Fast. Peter's warning exploded. He jumped before the claws reached the trunk. Derek landed where he had been. Peter fired a web at the branch above Derek's head and swung. No attack. Distance. Derek followed through the trees on foot. He was frighteningly fast, without needing roads. Peter switched angles. Left. Up. Behind. Derek cut one strand. Peter fired another. They reached a clearing. Derek stopped. Peter landed on a rock. "Done." "No." "What exactly is the test?" "Whether you attack when frightened." Peter felt anger. "You could have asked." Derek's expression said the idea was ridiculous. Peter understood the cultural gap immediately. Werewolves did not interview unknown threats politely. "Still, you don't get to attack me because you're curious." Derek stepped forward. Peter webbed the ground in front of him. A line. Derek looked down. Then at Peter. Boundary. Call it a suggestion. Derek stepped over. Peter shot web at his wrist. Derek tore free. Second around ankle. Derek cut. Peter learned. Single-line restraints were useless. He switched from binding Derek to binding environment. A web between two trees. Another behind. Derek lunged. Peter moved. Derek hit the stretched web sideways. The elastic force threw him into a trunk. Not enough to injure seriously. Enough to surprise. Peter landed. "Now are we done?" Derek stood. His eyes had changed from blue to normal. "You're not a hunter. Congratulations. You're not a werewolf. Also strong work." Derek looked at the web stuck to bark. "What are you?" Peter almost said Spider-Man. The name from the internet had already begun feeling separate from Peter Parker. That worried him. "Not your problem unless you make me one." Derek's mouth tightened. Everything supernatural in Beacon Hills becomes everyone's problem. That sounds exhausting. It is. Peter believed him. Derek told him about the Alpha. Not everything, Enough. The bite came from an alpha. Scott's control would worsen with the full moon. Hunters were already watching. Peter listened. Why tell me? Because Scott trusts you. Peter went still. Derek continued. Or Peter Parker. The mask suddenly felt thin. Spider sense flared. Derek did not attack. He knew. Not maybe. Knew. Peter's hand raised. Derek looked at the wrist. If I wanted your identity, the hunters would already have it. Peter did not lower the hand. How? Send. Of course. The mask did nothing to a werewolf's nose. Peter wanted to kick himself. Derek said, You smell the same. Peter's thoughts raced. Scott. Derek. Possibly other wolves. Identity security against humans did not equal security against supernatural senses. Peter had built a secret for the wrong audience. What do you want for keeping it? Derek's expression hardened. Nothing. Peter almost laughed. Everyone who said nothing wanted something eventually. Derek saw the distrust. Scott gets to choose who knows his secret, so do you. That answer hit harder because Derek himself was not asking permission about much else. Contradictory. Real. Peter lowered his hand slightly. Then don't use my name in the mask. Derek nodded once. They stood under rain. Not allies. Not enemies. Derek said, The Alpha will notice you. Why? You keep interfering. Peter looked toward town. That's kind of the point. Derek almost smiled. Then his head turned. A howl moved through the preserve. Scott. Closer than expected. Peter's spider sense tightened. Derek ran. Peter followed. No invitation needed. They found Scott near an old trail, half shifted and panicking. Peter kept the mask on. Derek approached from one side. Peter the other. Scott looked between them. This is weird. Peter said, Focus. Derek said, Listen to your heartbeat. Scott glared. Whose side are you on? Peter and Derek answered simultaneously. Yours. They looked at each other. Neither liked the coincidence. Scott laughed despite himself. The shift eased. Later Peter returned home and wrote, Mask fails against scent. Then, Derek knows. He stared at the sentence. The secret had expanded. Again. But so had the people carrying it. That might not be the same as losing control. Asterisk Chapter 10. The Spider Awakens. Derek taught Peter to stop fighting like someone who expected everyone else to be human. The lesson happened in an abandoned lumber yard. Derek had texted Scott. Scott had texted Peter. Peter had arrived masked because apparently this was his life now. Derek stood between stacks of wet timber. You rely on reflex. Peter looked around. That's generally useful. Against humans. You're a person. Derek's stare flattened. You know what I mean. He did. Peter's first fights had been built around avoiding fists, knives, tire irons. A werewolf could tear through the webbing that stopped a man. Could jump farther than Peter expected. Could recover. Derek pointed to the yard. Get to the other side. That's it. Without me touching you. Peter fired a web upward. Derek moved before the line tightened. Claws cut it. Peter dropped. Spider Sense screamed. He rolled under a swipe. Okay. He fired 2 webs. Not at Derek. At a suspended timber stack. Pulled. The logs swung. Derek jumped over. Peter went low. Derek landed ahead. Peter changed direction. The yard became geometry. Cranes. Cables. Railings. Forklift frames. Derek kept closing. Peter learned to use webs as temporary terrain. A line across a gap. A trip surface. An anchor to change direction. Never expecting one strand to hold. The first time Derek caught him, claws opened Peter's side through the hoodie. Peter gasped. The pain broke rhythm. Derek stopped instantly. Not a real attack. Still blood. Peter put a hand over the cut. That's deeper than necessary. You would be dead if it were an alpha. Helpful. The wound hurt badly. It did not close instantly. His healing was better than normal. Not magic. Not enough to erase damage. Derek looked. Can you keep going? Peter wanted to say yes. He thought about the bus. About acting because there had been no time. This was training. There was time. No. Derek nodded. That bothered Peter. You were testing whether I'd stop. Partly. You're annoying. So I've been told. They sat under the crane shelter while rain ran off steel. Derek gave him a clean cloth. Peter pressed it to his side. Scott says the full moon makes everything louder. It does. Does pain help control? Sometimes. Peter looked at the blood. That's a terrible training philosophy. Derek's expression shifted. Pain is information, not a solution. Peter blinked. That was more nuanced than expected. Derek continued. A lot of werewolves learn the wrong lesson because pain is the first thing that works. Peter thought about the spider sense instead. The warning screamed before danger. It could become another version of pain, useful enough to obey blindly. He had already begun doing that. Derek said, Your reflex tells you something is coming. Yes. Does it tell you what? No. Then stop treating it like an answer. Peter stared. Scott told you. Scott said you dodge before people move. Peter looked toward the timber yard. Derek had noticed anyway. They resumed only after the bleeding slowed. This time, Peter made one change. When the spider sense flared, he did not always jump. He looked for the threat. Sometimes it was Derek. Sometimes a falling chain Derek had thrown indirectly. Sometimes unstable footing. One warning came from behind. Peter ducked. A loose hook swung overhead. Not Derek at all. If he had attacked the wolf automatically, he would have misread the danger. By sunset, Peter reached the far fence 3 times. Derek touched him twice. The third run, Peter made it. Not because he became faster. Because he stopped defending the obvious direction every time the warning fired. Derek looked almost satisfied. Peter pulled off the outer mask enough to breathe. You tell anyone I appreciated this, I'll deny it. I don't care. Good. Then Derek said, Hunters are using mountain ash. Peter looked. What's that? Derek explained. A barrier supernatural creatures could not cross. Peter's body did not react to the sample Derek carried in a bag. Spider sense did. A prickling warning. Interesting. Peter could cross. Unknown. Derek poured a tiny line on concrete. Don't. Peter crouched. His spider sense sharpened near it. He touched one finger. Nothing. No invisible wall. He stepped across. Derek watched. You're not bound by it. Peter felt no triumph. That made him useful in a way hunters might exploit or fear. Don't tell Scott yet. Derek looked. Why? Because if he knows I can cross something he can't, he'll start thinking of me as the person who should. Derek considered, then nodded. That was the first secret Derek agreed to keep for Peter that had nothing to do with identity. A small thing. It mattered. At home, Peter stitched the cut manually before May saw. The healing would finish later. He wrote, agility is not invulnerability. Then, Spider Sense warns, it does not decide. The line stayed at the top of the page. Derek's lumberyard training produced the first serious disagreement between Peter and May after she knew. Peter came home, bleeding through the side of his shirt. May saw. What happened? Training. Her expression went flat. Training did that. Derek. Who is Derek? Peter stopped. Right. He had explained wolves generally. Not every person. Derek Hale. May's face changed. The Hale family. Beacon Hill's history. Fire. Rumors. He's a werewolf. May stared. Peter waited. She sat. Of course he is. The exhaustion in her voice almost made Peter laugh. Then she pointed at the wound. Why is a werewolf cutting you for practice? Because alphas are stronger, and I need to know what happens when webbing fails. May's eyes sharpened. You needed to be cut to learn that. No, it was an accident. Was it? Peter thought. Derek had controlled the strike. But accidents in training were still possible. He stopped immediately. May did not look reassured. Do I get to meet him? Peter blinked. What? If an adult is training you hard enough that you come home bleeding, yes. Derek is not exactly. Adult. Responsible. That does not improve it. Peter laughed despite. The meeting happened 2 days later at Deaton's clinic because May refused a ruined loft. Derek arrived looking like he'd rather fight an alpha pack alone. May stood with arms folded. Peter wished the earth would open. May said, "You're Derek." Derek nodded. "You cut my nephew." Peter closed his eyes. Derek looked at him. Peter said, "Don't." Derek answered May. During training. I gathered. He needs to know his limits. May said, and you need to know he's 17. Derek's expression changed. He knew. Maybe he had not thought about it enough. Peter watched. This was the value of bringing people from different contexts into the same room. Derek saw Spider-Man. Fighter. Potential ally. May saw Peter. Teenager. Both true. Deaton stayed nearby and wisely said nothing. May asked, "What happens if Peter says stop?" Training stops. Has he? Derek looked at Peter. Yes. May looked surprised. Peter said, "First day." And he stopped. That mattered. May's posture relaxed by a fraction. She asked about supervision. Medical plans. Whether Derek used full strength. No. Whether he taught lethal techniques. Not intentionally. Whether Peter sought training. Yes. The conversation became less accusatory as facts accumulated. Derek finally asked May, "Do you want him to stop?" Peter froze. May looked at him. That was the temptation. One adult could try to command another into ending Spider-Man. May answered slowly. I want him alive. Not the same. Derek nodded. So do I. Peter looked at both. Embarrassingly emotional. He hated. After Derek left, May said, I still don't like him. Neither do I half the time. Good. She continued. But I like that he stopped when you told him. Peter smiled. Yeah. The training agreement became more explicit after. No surprise, lethal-level attacks. Stop means stop. Deton check if serious wound. Peter tells May when sessions happen, not every detail. Derek grumbled about bureaucracy. Peter enjoyed that. The next lumberyard session felt different. Not safer because Derek suddenly became gentle. Safer because expectations were spoken. Derek attacked. Peter moved. He got hit once. No claws deep. He called stop when his shoulder went numb. Derek stopped. They rested. No shame. Peter was learning power did not make boundaries less necessary. It made them more. Asterisk Chapter 11, Spider Sense Awakens. The first full moon turned Beacon Hills high into a minefield. Scott vanished from class. Styles texted Peter 6 times in 3 minutes. Peter's spider sense would not stop. Every sharp sound pulled his attention. Every fast movement. Every person near Scott's empty locker. The problem was that danger existed everywhere, without always belonging to Scott. Peter left chemistry with a fake bathroom excuse. He found Styles near the locker room. Where is he? Inside. Shifted. Mostly. A crash answered. Peter looked at the security camera above the hall. Styles followed. We need him out without anyone seeing. Peter's mask was in his backpack. No time to change properly. He pulled the hood up and wrapped the lower cloth across his face. That is the bad mask, Styles whispered. Do you want fashion or Scott? Scott. They entered. Scott was crouched behind lockers. Claws embedded in metal. Eyes gold. Breathing too fast. Peter felt the warning, but not only from Scott. Outside. Another pressure. Hunters. He looked toward the rear exit. Styles. I know. No, not Scott. Styles froze. Peter whispered, someone outside. Scott's head snapped toward the door. His hearing caught them. The shift worsened. How many? Peter asked. Scott's voice came rough. 3, maybe 4. Hunters had timed the full moon. Of course. Peter needed to move Scott without revealing himself or Scott. He fired webbing across the high locker room windows, creating a white sheet that blocked sight from outside. Styles stared. Subtle. They already know something's in here. A crossbow bolt punched through the glass. Peter's spider sense flared. He webbed the bolt mid-flight. The line yanked it sideways into a locker. Styles's face went white. Scott growled. Peter looked at him. Stay with me. Hard. I know. A second bolt. Peter ducked. Mountain ash burst against the floor. Scott recoiled violently. The powder formed a partial line. Not complete. Peter stepped through. No effect. Scott stared. How? Later. He used a web to drag the ash line apart. The barrier broke. Scott could move. Peter pointed to the maintenance exit. Styles took Scott's arm. Go. Scott shoved him away. I'll hurt you. Styles said, yeah, probably. Peter almost laughed. Then hunters entered the front. Masked. Crossbows. Not Argent family, he recognized. One saw Peter. Spider. The word carried surprise. Peter fired web at the ceiling light. Darkness. Scott and Styles moved. Peter stayed. Not to fight. To slow. The first hunter fired where Peter had been. He stuck the crossbow limbs together. Second came with a blade. Peter used height. Wall. Ceiling. Dropped behind. Webbed both boots. No punches above what a human could survive. The spider sense warned from left. Peter turned. A wolfsbane-tipped bolt. He caught the shaft. The metal head still cut his palm. Pain. Not poison to him. The hunter saw. You aren't wolf. No. Then what? Peter yanked the crossbow away. Busy. He webbed the door shut and escaped through the high window. Outside, Scott and Styles had reached the tree line. Scott was losing control again. The moon overhead. Hunter sense. Fear. Peter landed near them. Scott lunged before recognizing him. Peter moved aside. Styles said, Scott. Scott stopped inches from Peter. His claws shook. Peter pulled the cloth mask down enough that Scott could see his mouth and jaw. Look. Scott focused. Peter said, You're not trapped. That was the problem. Scott's panic came from feeling every hunter as a closing wall. Peter pointed to the trees. There are exits, pick one. Scott's eyes flicked. Trail. Fence. Roof access. Not one cage. His breathing changed. The claws withdrew slightly. They moved. No dramatic cure. Just enough control to get him away. The hunters did not follow once school security alarms started. At home, Peter washed blood from his palm. The cut was already sealing. He thought about mountain ash. It warned his spider sense, but did not bind him. Hunters might discover. Derek knew. Scott now knew because he had seen Peter cross. Styles definitely knew because Styles knew everything eventually. Peter wrote, Mountain ash affects werewolves, not me. Then beneath. Being the person who can cross does not make me responsible for every crossing. He needed the sentence. The next full moon would test it. Asterisk Chapter 12. The first spider sense asterisk. Styles caught Peter changing a bloodied shirt in the Stalinsky bathroom. Peter should have locked the door. He had not because the house felt safe. That was almost funny. The door opened. Styles stopped. Peter stood shirtless with 3 claw marks along his ribs, half-healed and impossible to explain. Both stared. Styles slowly closed the door behind him. Bike accident. Peter sighed. Do you want me to lie better or worse? Styles looked at the wounds. Those are from Derek. No. Scott. No. Hunter. Peter nodded once. Styles sat on the closed toilet lid. Okay. That was all. No accusation. Peter appreciated it. Then Styles pulled an evidence bag from his hoodie pocket. The web strand. Still, you carry that around. I forgot it was in here. That's worse. Styles set it on the counter. It dissolved. The bag was empty except residue. Peter looked. How long? About a day and a half. Peter had not tested full environmental lifespan carefully. Useful. Styles leaned back. You know, if you're going to keep doing this, maybe don't use the same weird biological material everywhere. Peter stared. I don't have another kind. Right. Styles paused. So it is you. Peter closed his eyes. Damn. Styles smiled. Not triumphant. Relieved. Peter looked at him. You already knew. I was 98%. And now, 99.9. Why not 100? Healthy skepticism. Peter threw the bloody shirt at him. Styles caught it and immediately regretted the decision. Gross. They talked after. Not a confession speech. A list. Peter had strength. Reflexes. World crawling. Webbing. Healing. A danger sense. Styles kept interrupting with questions. Can you shoot web from anywhere else? No. Thank God. Styles. Science. Peter explained reserves. Styles stopped joking. So if you run out, I run out, and you still go out. Yes. That's stupid. Yes. That answer made Styles blink. Peter continued. I know. Styles looked at him. Then why? Peter thought about the laundromat boy. The bus. Scott. The hunters. Because after Elias died, he had wanted to stop waiting for permission to live. But he could not tell Styles about Elias. Not yet. My body can do things that matter if someone needs help. Styles said, that is the most superhero answer possible. Peter hated that. It's not about being a hero. Then what? Peter looked at the half-healed claw marks. Not walking away, because I'm scared someone will connect the dots. Styles's expression changed. He understood enough. The door opened a crack. Sheriff Stalinsky's voice from the hall. You too, okay? Peter grabbed a clean shirt. Styles shouted, chemistry. His father paused. Why are you doing chemistry in the bathroom? Styles looked at Peter. Peter looked at Styles. Experiment spilled, Peter called. The sheriff sighed. Clean it. Footsteps left. Styles whispered, terrible. You did that. Under pressure. Peter pulled the shirt on. Then Styles pointed the torn backpack strap. A tiny bit of web residue. You need a better suit. I need a better everything. Styles grinned. They spent the rest of the night sketching. Not a polished superhero costume. A practical one. Separate shoes. Different gate inserts, too much. A better mask with hard eye pieces. A hood that did not fall. Pockets for ordinary gear, because biological webbing was not infinite. First aid wrap. Phone hidden. No logos. Styles drew a spider anyway. Peter crossed it out. Styles drew another larger. Peter crossed that too. By 2 in the morning, they had a design. Styles looked at him. You going to tell Scott I know? He knows you know, I know you know. Styles stared. Peter smiled. See how stupid this is? Yes. The secret had become complicated enough that pretending none of them knew was more dangerous than admitting the small circle. Peter made one request. No board with my face. Styles nodded. No telling your dad, unless there's a reason. That one took longer. My dad could help, I know. He's also the sheriff. I know. If you're arrested. Styles. He stopped. Peter said, if keeping it from him starts putting him in danger because he doesn't understand what he's walking into, we revisit. That was fair enough. Styles agreed. When Peter left, he found a paper bag on the Jeep seat. Food. Sheriff Stalinsky had left it without asking why they were still awake. Peter ate on the walk home. The adults around these secrets kept feeding them without knowing. That could not last forever. Peter knew. Not yet did not mean never. The first time Sheriff Stalinsky almost caught Peter in the mask happened because Styles left a window open. Peter had changed in Styles's room after a patrol. Mask off. Suit partly peeled. A bruise along his shoulder. The sheriff's car pulled into the driveway. Styles looked outside. Ah. Peter stared. You said he was on night shift. He was. Apparently not. Footsteps downstairs. No time to fully change. Peter could climb out. The window. Then he looked at the suit draped over the chair. Evidence. He shoved it into Styles's closet. The closet would absolutely be opened eventually because Styles never stored anything logically. Peter grabbed normal shirt. Too slow. Sheriff Stalinsky called. Styles. Yeah. Why is Peter's bike outside? Why are Peter's shoes by the stairs? Styles whispered, your shoes. Peter closed his eyes. The sheriff climbed stairs. Peter pulled on jeans and shirt. Mask went under mattress. Spider-Sense screamed because the door was about to open, not because the sheriff meant harm. Peter resisted, jumping to ceiling. That would make this worse. The door opened. Sheriff stared. Peter stood barefoot. Styles sat on bed. Both breathing too hard. The sheriff looked between them. No. Styles said, no what? I don't want to know. Peter almost laughed. The sheriff's eyes moved to the bruise visible at Peter's collar. His face changed. Actually, I do. What happened? Peter froze. Styles started. Basketball. Peter said, training. They looked at each other. Terrible. The sheriff narrowed eyes. With who? Peter could lie. He chose partial truth. Derek Hale. The sheriff became very still. Why are you training with Derek Hale? Self-defense. Not false. Against what? Peter looked at Styles. Then sheriff. Beacon Hills. The sheriff sighed so deeply it felt historical. He stepped inside. Peter's spider sense flickered toward the closet. Suit. Not because sheriff knew. Because if he opened. The sheriff did not. He looked at his son. Are you in danger? Styles answered. Sometimes. Peter. Sometimes. The sheriff rubbed his face. You two understand this is not a normal answer. Yes, both said. That was almost funny. The sheriff looked toward the window. Rain. Open. Close that. Styles did. The immediate crisis became mundane. Later, after he left, Peter retrieved the suit. Styles whispered. That was close. Peter looked at the closed door. He was tired of closeness being the only measure. The sheriff already knew Beacon Hills was supernatural adjacent. Keeping him completely blind was becoming dangerous. Peter and Styles discussed. Not full reveal yet. But more. The next day Styles told his father Derek was helping with werewolf-related threats. The sheriff did not approve. Still, he knew enough to avoid arresting Derek on sight during the next incident. A partial truth changed outcome. Peter saw. The lesson fit Derek's earlier point. Not every boundary had to be either full confession or total lie. At home, Peter told May about the near catch. May stared. Your suit was under his son's mattress. Yes. Teenagers are terrible at covert operations. Apparently, she suggested an actual secure storage location. The garage cabinet. Locked. May had access to. Peter agreed. The mask stopped living under random furniture. Small logistics. Big difference. The next time the sheriff entered Stiles's room unexpectedly, the worst thing he found was the board. That was still bad. But not Spider-Man's suit. Progress. Asterisk Chapter 13. The web-slinging mystery unraveled. Allison Argent entered Peter's life carrying books and a family name he had already learned to distrust. The books were less threatening. They fell out of her arms outside English. Peter caught two before they hit the floor. Allison caught the third herself. Fast. Good reflexes. The same excuse again. She smiled. Peter right. Allison. He knew because Scott had said the name approximately 40 times in 2 days. Peter crouched to pick up a notebook. A black SUV rolled through the parking lot. Chris Argent behind the wheel. Peter's spider sense tightened before the man's eyes found him. Not immediate attack. Danger. Potential. Chris looked at Allison. Then Peter. Then the torn edge of Peter's glove, where webbing from the previous night had left a pale stain. Peter closed his hand. Chris drove on. Allison followed his gaze. My dad. Seems friendly. She laughed. Not especially. That was the first ordinary conversation. The second happened at lunch. Scott sat across from Allison, pretending his heartbeat was not audible to every werewolf within half a mile. Peter tried not to watch. Stiles absolutely watched. Allison asked Peter if he was from Beacon Hills originally. No. Where? Peter gave the same vague answer. Moved around. Not true enough. Not a lie he wanted to unpack. Allison nodded. Her family moved too. For a moment, they were just two newish kids talking about towns. Then Chris Argent came into the school with the principal. Peter's spider sense rose again. He looked toward the doors automatically. Allison noticed. You do that too. What? Check exits. Peter blinked. 2. She shrugged. My family is weird about situational awareness. Of course they were. After school, Peter saw why. He was on a roof across from an alley where an injured werewolf had collapsed behind a dumpster. Not Scott. A stranger. Hunters arrived before Derek. Chris among them. Peter was masked. He could leave. The werewolf had not injured anyone yet. The man was terrified and bleeding from a silver-edged trap. Chris's team surrounded. Peter listened. Alive, Chris ordered. Interesting. Another hunter said, Gerard wants samples. Chris's expression hardened. He's not here. Peter stored the name. Gerard. The wounded wolf panicked. His claws came out. The hunters raised crossbows. Spider sense erupted. Peter moved. A wide web sheet snapped across the crossbow line. Bolts stuck. Everyone looked up. Peter swung through the alley. Evening. One hunter tried a pistol. Peter webbed the barrel to the wall. Chris did not fire. He watched. Peter landed between them and the werewolf. "You're helping it," a hunter said. "I'm stopping you from shooting someone who's already down." "It's not